I directed one sketch for SNL, and I should say they did not beg me. I begged them. I went to them hat in hand, hoping that they would let me just be a guest for a week. And Lorne was very gracious. His exact words were, "Yes, the young man can come to space camp." And I went and I got to live the experience.
We need everyone in togas. Everyone down to the 8th floor now.
Rocky, there's no way these kids are going to hit their mark, so you better be wide enough to catch them all. We got that? Okay, be aware.
What is this? Why are you queuing up Carson? Who is that?
I think that's Tony Curtis. That's pretty normal right before a live show, right, Dave?
Yeah, if anything goes wrong, we bump the tape.
See? Right.
Welcome to Behind the Lens. Today, he is a director, a writer, a film fan, all sorts of things, and his latest film is Saturday Night, and it's so good. Please welcome Jason Reitman. Hi, Jason. Welcome to Behind the Lens. There you go.
It's a pleasure to be here, and mostly it's just a pleasure to be here with you.
Oh, and me too. I can't believe I've been doing this show, this series for a long time, and I've never had you in this chair. We've talked many times at different places.
I've been offended for a long time, so I'm glad that we could finally get this under the rug.
So finally, I said to the publicists involved with the film, I said, can we just do Jason Reitman for Behind the Lens right away? And they said, absolutely.
Wonderful.
So,
thrilled to be here.
Thanks for coming out. And congratulations on Saturday Night.
Thank you.
It's such a fun movie. I know it's been a passion project of, I guess SNL was a passion project of yours to begin with.
I've been obsessed with Saturday Night Live since I was a kid, but I think that's everybody. I think everybody has a moment where they realize what Saturday Night Live is, and you become addicted to it at some age. And of course, whatever cast is on at that moment that you get locked in becomes your forever cast.
You directed. It's on your IMDb. In between all the movies, Juno and Up in the Air and Labor Day and on and on and on with all the movies you've done, young adult, there is Saturday Night Live.
I went and I got to live the experience, the writing overnight, the being at the table read, finding out your sketch gets in, and of course the countdown to going live, which is more exhilarating than anything I've ever experienced.
Yeah, and you had actually known, obviously your father, Ivan Reitman, did Ghostbusters with many SNL, icons like Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd and everything. Did you know them way before this as a kid, hanging out on sets, as I imagine you might have done?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up on the set of Animal House and Meatballs and Stripes and Ghostbusters.
Were you in Animal House?
No. I was on that set, but I literally was weeks old, months old.
Yeah, because I heard you. As a baby, you might have been in it.
No, I have a great photo of myself on the set. And my parents are holding me, and I'm screaming, and it's in that classroom set where Donald Sutherland, teaches and has the bite of the apple. But look, I've always been a fan, but I don't think that's why I made this movie. I think my father had great advice for me early on, which was don't confuse your plot for your location. Juno's not a movie about teenage pregnancy. Teenage pregnancy is a location.
Right.
Thank You for Smoking is not a movie about cigarettes. Cigarettes are a location. And this is not a movie about Saturday Night Live. Saturday Night Live is a location. Right. But this is a movie about the people who create things. This is a movie about the moment a generation rips television out of the hands of another generation. And specifically, it's a movie about going live. It's about that. It's something that I think anyone can understand, whether they've ever done a high school play or a talent show at summer camp. There's that moment an hour before you go live for the first time and you put on a show and people have to coalesce in a creative endeavor, and that's what I wanted to make a movie about.
That's such a great thing that your father, piece of advice, because it's obviously worked for you on everything you're doing, the way you just described it.
Yeah, I think you always know a movie that gets its location confused for its plot, right?
Right.
And it's the difference between, The Godfather and countless other movies about the mafia, where there's movies that They just think of the mafia as the plot instead of the location, and that's all they make a movie about. And it's much less interesting than a movie that uses the mafia as a location, but the movie is about family.
Right.
You know, and the movie is about having different children, and how do you parent different children who step up to their responsibilities in different ways, and how do you handle difficult choices. And I think it's probably one of the 3 best rules of filmmaking I've ever gotten.
That's really great. So on Saturday night, in pulling this off, this is a very complicated kind of shoot, I would imagine, because you've got all of this cast, all of the background extras, constantly on, cameras moving. It's got so much energy when you see this movie, like the energy you would imagine in the 90 minutes before that show goes on the air. You somehow captured that in this film.
It's technically easily the most complicated movie I've ever done, and it's not unlike putting on a dance movie that takes place in one large location that was built as a 360 set. You know, we rebuilt the entire 8th and 9th floor of Rockefeller Center in their entirety, going back to the original blueprints. Not the blueprints from the 70s, the blueprints from, a century ago when the building was built.
Oh my God.
And so we had not only the original building blueprints, but we also had Jess Gontra, our production designer, had Eugene Lee's original set designs from everything from how the scaffolding was done to the stairwell at home base to, the original sets, the Wolverine set. And we built that so that we could create a world. And it's funny, when you think about world building, you usually think about films like, Avatar.
Right.
But we wanted to do world building for something that people recognize.
Yeah.
We've all watched Saturday Night Live. We feel like we have an understanding of that location. And it's a kind of dance movie that's not organized, but rather chaotic, which requires a different kind of choreography. And so we spent months building the location to make it feel real, choreographing the movement so that you felt, as an audience member, thrown in. That same feeling that you've had when you visited a set where you just go, who is everybody? What are they doing? And we wanted the experience of this film to be one in which it is chaotic at first, but the more you watch it, the more you get to know the different people and what they do. And by the end of the film, you feel like you're part of the crew itself.
Yeah, it's really, the whole premise of it, doing the first 90 minutes, I just thought was brilliant, because you're watching a countdown clock here.
Yeah.
And it builds this level of suspense that you don't usually see in comedy.
Right.
But this is actually a thriller.
100%. It's a thriller comedy, and it is the 90 minutes leading up to the first episode. We always knew the last line of the movie is going to be live from New York. It's Saturday night. It's how do we get there? And just to give you a sense of how built in that was from the beginning, when Gil Kennan and I wrote the script, we numbered the pages backwards.
Really?
Yeah, so you started on page 100, and the last page of the script was page 1.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you did co-write this one, and you've often worked with Diablo Cody on some of your films and things, but as a writer, you are so invested in this with Gil. So how do you work together in creating
It's interesting.
this?
Gil lives in London, and I live in Los Angeles, so I feel like we get a larger portion of the clock. We have hours of writing together, we have hours of writing alone, and during COVID, we started interviewing every living member that was of SNL that was alive and in the building on October 11th, 1975. Wow. So it started with Lorne, then Dick Ebersol and Rosie Schuster, and then every cast member, every writer, and then into the crew people, the artisans. So the production designer, art director, costumer, members of the band.
NBC Pages at the time?
Yeah, Howard Shore, who wrote the opening theme.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Paul Schaefer, who was the pianist in the band. Like
amazing.
Literally anyone who gave us just a taste of what it was like to be there.
That's incredible. That's a big job right there, just the research levels that you put into this.
Well, I had to learn to try to do what you do, and it's really hard because you interview people, and when I'm sitting here doing this with you, I'm thinking, he'll just ask me some questions, but as an interviewer, you're trying to keep the subject on track. Right. They start telling you a 10-minute story you already know. You're like, can we please move on? They want to go these different directions.
Oh, we can always cut.
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm sitting there and you going, all right, I maybe have an hour with them before they lose patience with me. And I want to get as many good stories. I want to try to get them past the stories they've told a million times.
Right.
And it actually helped me develop a much deeper respect for the job of journalism and how hard it is to get something new and true. And what do you say to a subject when they are telling you a story and you know in your heart it is a lie? When you are going, one, I don't believe you. Two, this does not mesh with anything I've heard up until now. I know you were not in that room, but please keep going.
Yeah, I've had that as an interviewer
Yeah.
with one very famous Oscar-winning actress who
Yeah.
told me, I knew
Was it Charlize?
not true.
It was Charlize, wasn't it?
No, it was not.
Oh, I'm going to tell her.
But it was somebody that through the whole scenario of this movie she was making 5 years into the future,
Yeah.
and it was the whole thing. I just said, you know what? Let her live with her thing, because
Yeah.
I don't like to correct somebody like that.
Right.
And it's just not good. But that is you have to be a bullshit meter there.
Yeah,
too.
and on our film, what we realized is that this is going to be a weaving together of the memories of what it was like to be there. So we're weaving together truth, myth, legend,
Yeah.
and hopefully between all of it, you start to feel what it was like. And that's really what we were after.
Yeah.
It's what does it feel like when you're on the floor of SNL and they are counting down and you can't find John Belushi? And what do? How does this thing go to air?
Exactly. As you know, I saw it at Telluride at the very first screening, which was so much fun. But afterwards, I saw you, and I had to ask you. I said, did that really happen? Did that really happen? It all really happened.
It is all born of truth. These are
Yeah.
all, we didn't make anything up. Everything
Maybe
comes
not
from
in
the
those
stories.
90 minutes.
Exactly. But everything comes from the stories that we heard. And as a result, it is hard to fathom how this show actually got to air because so much was against them.
Including Johnny Carson, apparently.
Yeah, look, no generation wants to give up control. I think we've kind of seen this in evidence in politics, but we've seen this in evidence everywhere.
Right.
And it is down to the next generation to stop being patient and to rip control, to grab the baton. And, I think we kind of know that Woodstock was the moment this happened in music, or that early 70s cinema is the point this happened in film. But in 1975, Saturday Night Live is the moment when one generation said, we are tired of watching a certain type of TV that looks like vaudeville.
Yeah.
We want something that looks and feels like us.
But something new like that on a Saturday night at 11:30, that's pioneering stuff. That is there's no precedent for that, really. They had reruns of The Tonight Show on Saturday night. So the audience that's watching that is a much older audience, and how you lure them. But I do remember, and I was a page at NBC, as I told you before, and we got together every single Saturday night and watched it as a group. It was a whole different experience for me in seeing television.
Yeah, and look, I think at the time, there was no presumption that young people would want to stay inside on a Saturday night and watch TV.
Yeah,
And, and of course it became appointment viewing. So part of our job in making this movie is trying to get back into the heads of everyone who was there at the time and imagining what their future might be. And so for Dan Aykroyd, for Chevy Chase, for John Belushi, for Gilda Radner, for Lamorne Morris, it's do they think this show is going to be a hit? And more importantly, do they realize in real time that they are changing culture? That's something that's always fascinated me is if you were in the room with Amadeus, if you were on the set of Jaws, would you know they're changing history right now? Like the genius is getting birthed into the universe.
Right.
Can you feel it, or does it just feel like another day at work? And that's what we wanted to look at in Saturday Night.
I think famously, if you go back even further, the movie Casablanca, which many people cite as their favorite movie of all time, was a complete mess when they were shooting.
I've heard about that, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So nobody really knows it. But in the terms of the casting of this movie, I imagine that wasn't easy because you've got such a vast cast here and it's got to be perfect without being an impression. They've got to be real actors here playing these roles.
Yeah, we knew early on we didn't want these to be impersonations. And that's what I first saw. When we started casting, John Papsidera, who was extraordinary, did all the Chris Nolan films.
Yeah.
He, the first things we looked at together were people who were doing SNL versions of characters. That is to say, Dan Aykroyd is Bassomatic, and we needed to nail down what was the essence of each one of these characters on that night. Chevy Chase is an ego that needs to be humbled. Garrett Morris is searching for his identity. Who is he? You know, Gilda Radner is this overwhelming well of empathy. And once you could identify that essence, we could look for the actor who was ready to portray that.
Yeah. And how long did that casting process
Longest
go
of
on?
my career. I mean, yeah, it felt like a year. I mean, we kept going and going, and the hardest one was Dan Aykroyd.
Yeah.
You know, this combination of his comedy, his verbosity, his sex appeal, it's such a unique combination. And Dylan O'Brien just did stuff that we'd never seen before. Like, he just came in and he just understood him down to the bone.
Yeah, which is great. And recreating those sketches like that too was really, you know, great.
Yeah, and the question is, can you comedically recreate a sketch, but in the next moment have a genuine, vulnerable, emotional scene where you know, a character is wondering, what comes of this night? Where do I go from here?
Exactly. You know who I love too in it? Tommy Dewey. I'm going to do a shout out for Tommy Dewey.
Please.
Because I just saw his movie last night, Your Monster, and he was fantastic in it.
Oh, I love that you're
But I thought he
throwing
was,
that out
I when I saw this movie, I go like, who's that playing Michael O'Donoghue?
Yeah.
Because he just pops too. They all do. They all have their moments.
You know, Tommy Dewey has that rare gift that he is able to be comedic while saying things that are just inhuman. And there have, you know, been a few brilliant dark comedians in history who can say things that other people can't.
Right.
You know, the Lenny Bruces of the world, and or Billy Bob Thornton for a while, I think was exactly that person. He could say things that you couldn't imagine any other actor saying. And by the way, Charlize Theron is a great example of a comedian. She's an actress who can say things that other people can't. And Tommy Dewey comes into the role of Michael O'Donoghue, a complete one-of-a-kind genius comedian with a deep well of darkness inside him. And Tommy's, you know, it's just, you can't keep your eyes off him.
No, he's great. You know somebody's going to be a star or going to be around for a long time in this business when you see them.
Yeah.
And that's great. You mentioned Charlize Theron. One of my favorite movies of yours was Young Adult with her. And you have done such a series of interesting, smaller, character-driven movies. Unlike, you know, people might have expected, oh, he's the son of Ivan Reitman, he's going to go out and do Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
You waited a long time before you did.
And even then, I kind of did a character movie of a Ghostbusters
Exactly.
movie.
And it was noticeable. I actually thought, wow, this has got heart, it's got emotion, it's got all of this.
Ghostbusters is a location to do a movie about 3 generations of a family coming to terms with who they are, and a daughter of a Ghostbuster who's scared to pick up a proton pack, and a granddaughter of a Ghostbuster who's ready to. And through it, I was just kind of talking about my own relationship with Ghostbusters itself and my fears of picking up the proton pack myself.
That is it. Because the next Ghostbusters movie is fine, but it didn't have that for me. Yours had that kind of human thing that I noticed right away, and I said, wow, this is different.
I'm really proud of Frozen Empire as well, and I think it's a great movie for Gil, but with each film that you're a director of, you have to find your own way. Like, at the end of the day, every movie is autobiography.
Right.
People never think about that because you just think the director is the person setting up the camera, but like, every movie is autobiography in one way or another. And, you know, I had just become a dad when I made Juno.
Yeah.
All of my fears about fatherhood, whether I would live up, whether I'm ready. Am I ready to be an adult, or is this the thing that's going to define me forever? These are the questions that I went into Juno making. And I feel like, and Up in the Air was the same thing, you know? At the time of making Up in the Air, I'm having all these questions about monogamy, long-lasting relationships, and you know, how you navigate the world alone or with somebody. And, you know, it may seem like a romantic comedy starring George Clooney, a guy who fires people for a living, but at the end of the day, I'm trying to tell a very personal story, and Saturday Night was no different.
And, you know, with Up in the Air, you take somebody like Anna Kendrick, and you're a great director of actors. You know, you have a knack to bring out the best in them, and that performance by her was phenomenal.
You know what? I wish I could say that it was my doing, but the truth is that I've been really lucky. I've been really lucky to come across the actors that I have at the times that I have, and that I'm put in a position to watch them give brilliant performances. And I've found over the years that my job more than anything is just to make actors feel safe and feel comfortable and give them a place to, you know, try things, make mistakes. I say the same thing to every actor the night before I start shooting with them. You already know how to do this.
Right.
I tell them not to prepare, not to think too much about it, because I've cast you because you already know how to do it.
Yeah.
And we're going to be able to get there on set together.
Right.
It may take 2 takes, it may take 12 takes. That doesn't matter.
Just let them do it.
You already know how to do it.
Yeah.
And look, not everyone listens. You get people to show up and they've over-prepared, and then you got to spend a little time like unwinding them and try to remove all the prep work they did so they can just be in the moment. And it's usually around then that they start having a good time. And when they have a good time, that's when the good stuff comes.
And then you have actors like in Saturday Night, you know, that are total pros that have done this a million times.
Yeah.
And you can just like say, come and do this, come and play Willem Dafoe as Dave Tebbutt.
Yeah.
J.K. Simmons obviously was in Juno. You've known him a long time.
Yeah.
As Milton Berle
Yeah.
was just beyond. It was so cutting, that performance. You know, anybody can come in and maybe do an impersonation like we were talking, but this was not. This is like he captures what I imagine is the heart or not of Milton Berle.
Well, you know, Milton Berle, and a lot of people don't know this, but Milton Berle, you know, at one point was the most important thing on television and captured a vast majority of the audience. And by the time Saturday Night Live comes out, he's desperately trying to cling on to his popularity and his space on TV. And he is there as the reason as writers that we put him in as a representation of this is what TV was. Yeah. And it's toxic. And he's a toxic person. Yeah. So.
And he hosted Saturday Night Live.
Famously, what's considered the worst episode of Saturday Night Live ever, the one that Lorne refuses to let air ever again. And JK has that rare ability. This is why I love him. This is why I love working with him. He could be completely charming in one scene, a song and dance man. You fall in love with him, and in the next scene, be absolutely terrifying. It's why he was perfect in Whiplash.
Yeah,
you know?
right.
And he knows how to occupy both space. And look, he has a 3-scene arc in this movie. Yeah. And those 3 points on the island chain could not be further apart. But he has a way of traveling to them and making you believe each one of those emotions.
And famously, he's known for his manhood or such thing.
Yeah.
And this is something you address in the movie too. Did that really happen?
Yeah, Milton Berle was famous for exposing himself.
Yeah.
And something that, look, I don't know if there was a time in history when that was considered charming. It's certainly not considered charming now. But he did this all the time. He did this to people at SNL, and it became, a great dramatic device.
Yeah, very funny and shocking. It's all at the moment, and you have to say, did that really happen? That's the incredible thing about this film. I have to ask you though, you were obviously, you said, basically a baby on the set of Animal House and thing, born into this business. Did you ever have any doubts that you would not go into this business?
Oh yeah, certainly. I mean, as a teenager, I was well aware of the feelings about, you know, what we call nepo-babies today. Yeah. And I think my instinct at the time was, why would I want to go to a job where everyone's presumption of me was that I was a spoiled brat who never worked a single day in his life, had no talent, probably had an alcohol or drug problem, most likely an asshole. And I went pre-med. I thought about being a doctor. I thought about being a psychologist. And my father came to visit me in school and said, "What are you doing?" And I explained all my reasoning. And he said to me, "Look, being scared isn't a reason to do anything." And gave me the courage to try to be a storyteller. And I started making short films. And at the time, I was really grateful for Sundance and the film festivals. Oh, yeah. Because they were oddly an opportunity to just throw my hat into the ring. I could submit my short film like everybody else. And if it got that Sundance approval, it meant something. It meant that I could show my film to other people and be like, I'm not just a Reitman, I've played Sundance. Yeah. I've not only played Sundance, I've won awards at these different film festivals. And they gave me legitimacy in a way that I desperately needed, because I knew what people presumed. And rightly so. I think I would have probably felt the same way. My daughter came to me once, and she's about to turn 18, and she had a film class. And she came home one day and she said, they all want me to fail. And I said to her, you're right. You were born with incredible advantages in this world, but there's gonna be a lot of people who want you to fail.
Yeah.
That's what comes with the territory. It's what I grew up with, what's what you're about to grow up with. And the trick is to learn to have gratitude for all the good things that you've been given and ignore the misconceptions of others.
Yeah. And you've definitely done that, right from Thank You for Smoking, which was your first after all those shorts. I think. Yeah, right. Which was a brilliant satire and so funny. And, people go like, whoa, I don't think they need to look at the name Reitman or anything. You said, who did that?
Well, they can look at whatever they want. I mean, it's funny, in those moments, I feel lucky to be a Reitman, but I feel just as lucky to have met Christopher Buckley.
Yeah.
I feel just as lucky that actors like Aaron Eckhart and Robert Duvall said yes. As a director, we rely so much on the goodwill of others.
Yeah.
We rely on the green lights. We rely on the actors saying yes. We rely on the crew making the sacrifices that they do to show up and actually make a movie, which is extraordinary work. I mean, it's just, by the time I get on set as a director, there are people who've been there for hours, and so all you ever want to do as a filmmaker is make something worthy of that sacrifice, so that a year or two later, when the crew sees the film and they realize that they gave up half a year of their life for it and time they could have spent with their family, with their kids, or making something else, that they look in the movie and they go, that was worth it.
Yeah. Exactly. And before we go, I have to say, it's not just looking at the movie. You've gone beyond that now, shepherding a whole group of directors in saving, for me, the most iconic theater in Los Angeles, where I grew up and saw my first movie, The Village Westwood. They were going to turn into an office building or something, inside. And you said, no, this is where people need to see movies. They need to see it on a big screen, and they need to experience it that way.
I grew up in Los Angeles going to Westwood.
Yeah.
For anyone who grew up in Los Angeles, they knew Westwood was movie heaven.
Yeah.
And the sad state of affairs is that it's no longer movie heaven. And I desperately want to bring Westwood back to what it used to be.
Yeah.
And I remember the day the National Theater literally was torn down seemingly overnight. And I couldn't imagine something similar happening to the Village, one of the most important movie theaters on earth.
Yep.
And I'm just lucky again that a lot of people said yes, that when I reached out to friends like Chris Nolan, Guillermo del Toro, Denis Villeneuve, Steven Spielberg, and frankly 30 others, that they all said yes. And we invested our money into this movie theater. It's the first movie theater I think that was bought using the money from the receipts of tickets being sold to other movies. and now we have a lot of hard work ahead of us. The next year is going to be about cleaning the place up, putting it back on its feet, and I cannot wait to see a movie there on opening day again.
I can't wait to go again. And when I was going, I would go in Friday afternoon or Thursday afternoon and see some big movie there, and there were 12 people in that theater.
Well,
going to bring it back to life.
That's the goal, and at the very least, you and I will be there eating popcorn.
That's for sure.
All right.
Thank you, Jason Reitman, for joining us on Behind the Lens.
Thanks for having me.